Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and I have not one, but two special guests with me today. I'm joined today by the diabolical Darren.
Hello, good to be here.
And the sadistic Samuel.
Thank you kindly, sir. It's good to be back.
These are my partners in crime for today's podcast, and what today's podcast is going to be devoted to, as we all know, horror is divided into so many subgenres. You know, when the word horror gets mentioned, it's a very broad horizon. That, you know, it can easily be split into so many subgenres. We've got supernatural, we've got slasher, psychological, etc., etc. And today we're just going to be talking about our personal favourite subgenres. We've actually chosen 3 subgenres each. So we're just going to be talking about these subgenres, why we like them so much, some of our favourite films within them subgenres, and maybe some hidden gems, some underrated films out there that maybe people haven't heard of. Glad to have you two guys back on board for this episode.
Yeah, and really looking forward to talking about these. Should be some fun.
Pleasure's all mine. Oh, we've got some good ones for all of you here.
Yep, and what we're going to do, we're going to let Samuel take this, the reins. Samuel's going to go first here. What have you actually chosen as your third favourite subgenre, Samuel?
Oh, that for me has to do with the zombie genre. So I think it's fair to say everyone has their sort of starting points with horror when they're a kid. And I'm not just talking about watching Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. We're talking about kids' films, for example. So my first introduction to horror, as well as a certain TV show, as well as zombies, was Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Great animated film, yeah.
Oh, surprise! You know what? For straight-to-video release, it is surprisingly really well animated, some great voice performances, and it's pretty scary. I mean, especially the tagline, this time, the monsters are real. Yeah. And they really delve into the atmosphere with the likes of zombies. And I think that was the seed that would stretch on for decades to come. I mean, we've spoken plenty of times about the likes of George Romero, so that's a nice starting point. I think I also have a soft spot for the works of Lucio Fulci, for example. So City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, Zombie Flesh Eaters, which the Beyond, I didn't realize how many people absolutely love that film.
Yeah,
I know people who's got tattoos of it, and I know some people who've got t-shirts of it.
Yeah, some people actually regard it. Some people out there would say it's arguably Fulci's best film.
Which is
probably
certainly
one of them.
Oh, see, that's debate. I think I would say Don't Torture a Duckling is his masterpiece. That doesn't mean I would say it's my favourite, though. Then again, that's absolutely disputable.
Yeah. You've said, I mean, what's your, you know, if somebody put a gun to your head and actually said, what is your all-time favourite zombie film, you know, what would you say? What is your favourite zombie movie?
Well, if it was on the spot, see, I'd be shot now with such a delayed response. It'd be Zombie Flesh Eaters. Okay. I think because I introduced a screening of a society we were at to watch on the big screen, that amazing moment with the eye splinter. I won't dive into that. Yeah, and the bit where a zombie fights a shark. It's a real shark.
You wouldn't see that in today's day and age. That'd be a CG shark, or that'd be a CG person. Incredible. And yeah, Zombie Flesh Eaters is one of my favourite, if not my favourite Fulci film. Great zombie film. That was
right.
Really...
That's interesting, because with zombie, I like it. But I wouldn't even put it in my top 5 Fulci.
Okay.
I prefer, and I don't know if you can call it a zombie film, but I prefer House by the Cemetery. I suppose it's kind of a zombie film.
It's a different kind of zombie. Yeah, like with House by the Cemetery even. City of the Living Dead. They're kind of zombie films, but not your traditional zombie films. There's teleportation involved, and yeah, they're very Fulci. I'm glad Fulci got mentioned, because Fulci, his movies are like very kind of, how do I put this? Very kind of out there and kind of crazy, aren't they, some of these films?
You're not kidding. I mean, The Beyond itself is a weird film. It's a film that explores the decay and the degradation of the body, and yet it's not as it doesn't have the same level of, it's not as violent as, say, Zombie Flesh Eaters or City of the Living Dead, because it is outright aggressive violence, whereas The Beyond is a decay, and of course the introduction with the zombies, a shining example of the real essence of the decay of the body.
Yeah. Zombies used to terrify me as a kid. You know, Night of the Living Dead, I've mentioned this before in a previous podcast. You know, it's the granddaddy of zombie films, and to me, just that movie, you know, terrifying experience, released in '68, the low budget, very kind of almost Twilight Zone aesthetic to that film. Night of the Living Dead absolutely terrified me. The thing is, we're in this age now, aren't we, where there is this huge saturation of zombies now with the likes of commercial successes like The Walking Dead and that. You can't kind of get away from zombie material at the moment.
And it's very difficult to find one that's a good example. I'm glad you mentioned about low budget, because there was one I discovered years back, which you could class as a hidden gem. It's called The Battery.
Okay.
Made in 2012, $6,000 budget. And the zombies tend to take more of the background. There are certainly zombies. You certainly have your moments of violence, you know, zombie flesh eating, if you like. However, it's mainly about the dynamic between the two characters who play the roles absolutely brilliantly. They're they're trying to get on with things, that accepting with the terms of this new normality, and you have this amazing bit at the end, which is about claustrophobia, the sense of isolation, and about that breaking point. So if you're a zombie fan and you want to break away from the mainstream of the likes of The Walking Dead or Left 4 Dead or World War Z, although we can argue about that, The Battery is a nice addition to the zombie genre.
Yeah, I tell you, there's one modern zombie film that I absolutely love that I don't think either of you two have seen yet. It was released in 2016, and it's a Korean movie called Train to Busan.
I got around to eventually. Yeah.
I love that movie. I mean, that's the thing. I'm somebody that does actually feel a little burnt out from zombie stuff. So I went into Train to Busan with no expectations whatsoever. I just, it's another zombie film. We've seen, dime a dozen. Great movie.
Yeah.
Intense, claustrophobic, very well acted as well for a film of its subgenre. You really root for the characters. It's highly emotive, and highly recommend it to anyone that loves zombie films.
I have heard there's a new one out at the moment called Zombie Ready.
I've not heard of that.
It's a Pakistan film. It's supposed to be really good.
Okay.
But in regards to zombie films, I'd just like to say that my all-time benchmark favourite zombie film is Day of the Dead.
Okay, yeah. I think that's got some of Savini's best effects.
Yeah, but I also like really cheesy stuff of the Italian zombies of the 80s. And Burial Ground is one of my favourites.
Oh, yeah.
Burial Ground, Nights of Terror.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got a bit burnt out with the zombie, but I can always go back to those Italian 1980s films.
Yeah,
I love them.
I mean, Dawn of the Dead, obviously, I know that's like the godfather of zombie films for some people. Dawn of the Dead, great movie, classic. Have any of you guys seen The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue?
Yeah. It's a shut jaw. It's one of those very rare examples of a video nasty that actually delivers on its goods.
Yeah, have you seen it, Darren?
Yeah, I do own it. The first time I ever seen that, I watched it with this horrible English dub.
Yeah, okay.
Oh no.
I know it's sacrilege, isn't it? Because I usually watch them by their own language.
The dubbing in a lot of these films, like, get into Italian cinema quickly, some of the dubbing is just so bad.
Oh, it's laughable.
But it doesn't detract, I still like the film, but some of the dubbing is just so atrociously bad, isn't it?
But yeah, it's a great film. Great film, I will say that, yeah.
Yeah. For me, obviously, like I say, Night of the Living Dead. And, zombies are here to stay, it seems. It's the whole zombie subgenre doesn't seem to really be going anywhere. 2004, we had, obviously, Shaun of the Dead, which I think is a great film. I love Shaun of the Dead. Obviously a horror comedy. But yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts on that film, guys?
Absolutely love it. I think Edgar Wright actually shows his talents. I mean, just coming off the show Space, which thank you for introducing that to me. It has the right thing though. It captures the horror. It captures the humanity of the characters as well, which is something I'd say, which is much closer to Romero than Fulci. And, there are some amazingly funny parts, especially with Nick Frost. We're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, great.
I really like the film as well. Like Sam said, there's loads of nods, to the old original, zombie films of the era. But it always makes me laugh, that film.
Yeah, really. It's a love letter because with 2002's 28 Days Later, which was obviously a big success, and in a way kind of revived and reinvented the zombie genre. We got this kind of new wave of zombie films where, infected, running after you. And of course we got 2004's Dawn of the Dead, which I think is a really good remake, actually, in fact. There was this kind of new wave of zombie film, like with Wreck as well, which is actually one of my favourite found footage films. There was this kind of new trend of zombie films coming out, wasn't there?
Yeah, and the bizarre... I don't know if you've had arguments about this. I've had arguments with people whether or not the infected can be classed in the same category as zombies. I mean, they're not necessarily a new thing. With Umberto Lenzi's Nightmare City in 1980, one of the first examples of quote-unquote the running zombie.
Yeah, like Return of the Living Dead as well in 85. They do run, don't they? They even speak, don't they? Like brains, and... doesn't one of the zombies in that film actually call out for another ambulance, send more or something as well?
Yeah.
Because that was kind of like, that was one of the early Return of the Living Dead was very much kind of a postmodern zombie film, wasn't it? Because it actually references Night of the Living Dead in that film.
Oh, I love Return of the Living Dead. It's got that old sort of punk rock sort of style to it. You've got a great soundtrack. What's not to love about that film?
It was directed by Dan O'Bannon, wasn't it? That actually wrote Alien.
Didn't he pass away recently as well? I think.
I'm not sure.
Or fairly recently.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not actually like that. That must have got past me. But yeah, I think Return of the Living Dead is a good horror comedy in that. And as I said, zombies used to terrify me. They did. As a kid, the thought of a dead body coming back to life and walking around and feeding on the flesh of the living was a scary concept. The Walking Dead, I'll admit, I did watch the first few seasons. I thought that was a really good show. Admittedly, I kind of lost interest in it as the show went on. It got to it felt like it was a bit of a chore to get through in later seasons. Too much talking, not enough... I'm all for character development, but it seemed to be very poorly paced and a lot of unnecessary padding, if you know what I mean. It felt like 16 episode seasons could probably be shortened down to 10 or 12.
Yeah, The Walking Dead's not for me. But have any of you guys seen Dead Set?
Yes, set in the Big Brother house. Yes,
that's right. I did enjoy that, mind.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was really well done.
Yeah, seeing Davina McCall become a zombie. I mean that's a highlight in itself, isn't it? I'm not a big fan of Davina McCall, actually. It's not that I dislike her; she's just everywhere, isn't she? You just can't get away from her. But yeah, Dead Set. That was quite good. So yeah, zombie genre, very popular subgenre. In fact, huge cult following for them films, isn't there?
I'm glad Sam mentioned Nightmare City as well, because that's one of my favourites.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
That could go into the cannibal genre as well.
Oh, certainly. I mean, Umberto Lenzi certainly has his name in both of those genres as well. Did you get your hands on the Arrow video? They did a nice restoration for Nightmare City.
Yeah, I do own that one. Yeah, it's probably the best it's ever looked. I don't think it got a great DVD release, if I remember rightly. But that certainly Arrow put those things to right.
Yeah, that's one I need to see. I know of Nightmare City, never actually watched it. Shockingly, don't hate me or anything, but yeah, I need to get on that one. So, Darren, we're going to move on to the subgenre for you now. What's in third place? Because I realise that we've actually got one subgenre that we've both got on our list. Right. What's in third place for you?
Okay, in third place I've got cannibal films.
Okay.
So I started watching them back, I'd say, in the 1990s, and one of my mates, he had like a really third generation bad VHS copy of Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So we popped that in one night, and all I can say is it actually worked for the film, that it was so degraded and really bad quality.
Yeah.
Just absolutely worked for the film. And then I eventually got to seeing a better copy and all that. But the real animal violence, I don't get me wrong, I don't condone that in any way, shape or form, but it seems to be necessary in these type of films. It really gives it that sort of edge and grittiness.
A level of authenticity, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one of the most controversial films of all time, isn't it? And
That's an
I find that hard to
understatement.
watch. I don't like seeing animals harmed, and obviously animals were really harmed, and that's just one aspect that kind of pushed me away from the film.
There is a re-edit, funny enough.
Go on, Sam, sorry.
No, sorry, my apologies. There is a re-edit which deals with some of the animal stuff, and thankfully, Britain's never legally owned an uncensored version of Cannibal Holocaust, and it's completely understandable why, for many a reason.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think I've got 3 or 4 versions of it, all imported. So, but yeah, I like to say as well, you know, my love for cannibal films then progressed, and as you go, there's all sorts of different mixed genres in there. You know, there's a wide range of films ranging from the likes of Anthropophagus, Absurd, Motel Hell, even The Hills Have Eyes and Wrong Turn. You could class as a cannibal film.
Yeah,
which
I'm so glad you brought up Motel Hell.
Yeah.
That's a cool
what's
film.
What's the tagline to that now? Farmers Fritters or something like that.
Oh, I can't remember the tagline. Wasn't that 1980? That was
1980, yeah, and that could be classed as a slasher as well. See?
Yeah, certainly. It's one of them. It's like you said. It's one of them hybrids, part slasher, part obviously famous. I mean, the one scene I always think of when I think Motel Hell is the chainsaw duel.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. It's the twist. It's the confession near the end as well. It's just that cream on top as well.
Yeah, it's the pig mask as well.
Yeah. So with Cannibal Holocaust then, I'll admit, it has been a long time since I've seen it. It's easy to see why. I mean, it is, you know, as I said, one of the most shocking films ever made. I believe the director, was actually taken to court, wasn't he, to actually prove that his crew was still alive.
Yeah, he was, I actually done a podcast on Cannibal Holocaust going back about a year ago. And we delved right into the background of that film, and some of it is really, you know, close to the edge and what happened. It was like sort of on the fly, the way they shot it. Yeah. There was one of the members in the film, one of the guys who's like their tour guide in the film, he actually got killed in real life.
Okay.
By someone who had seen the film.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of backstories of that, and hopefully we'll cover that again. But there's a few others I want to mention as well. There's Cannibal Ferox.
Yeah, starring John Saxon, right?
John Saxon's John Saxon? Yeah.
What a fate.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, like, Umberto Lenzi's, like, people don't give it the recognition it deserves. You've got John Morgan in it as well, which is Lamberto Radici, isn't it? His proper name is. Yeah. He's in City of Living Dead as well. You've also got Deodato also directed Jungle Holocaust a couple of years earlier than Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay. Isn't that also known as Last Cannibal World, or am I thinking of a different title?
Oh, that's right. You're spot on. And that's a decent one. It's not quite as good as Holocaust, but Cannibal Holocaust, but it's you know, worth a watch. You've also got Man from Deep River, Sergio Martino, from 1972. That's a bit, you know, that's certainly one of the early ones, you know, where you've got the animal violence started and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's one I haven't seen, but I've heard a lot about, called Eaten Alive from 1980.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's another Lenzi film as well. It has one of the classic Italian scream queens. I forgot her name's the name. I can't remember her name. That's another shining example of that blend of the scream queens as well as the cannibal film. So good call on that one.
It's definitely one I want to watch. And funny enough, just by chance, I watched one last night. Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals.
All right, yeah.
The Emmanuel films. Who directed that one? I want to say Joe D'Amato, but I don't think it is. It is.
You are right. Yeah, Joe D'Amato. I was shocked as well. And you'd think, you know, with the name Emmanuel, you think you're going to... And don't get me wrong.
Softcore porn.
It is.
Well, yeah, basically, that's what the Emmanuel films were known for, wasn't it?
But there's some really good shot, you know, cannibal stuff in there.
Yeah.
And it's not quite as just all porn as you would imagine. There is quite a lot of cannibal stuff.
The porn certainly helps, though, doesn't it?
Well, it helped, yeah. You've got Susan Scott in there as well. She was in Death Walks at Midnight, one of the giallo films I like.
Yeah.
But that's one I would say to people, that's one to get hold of. It's worth a watch, like.
Yeah. There's actually some kind of more modern films that actually revolve around cannibalism that I'd like to mention as well. One being Ravenous, starring Robert Carlyle.
Oh, okay. I've not seen that.
Yeah, Ravenous was a late 90s movie. There's also... Now, this is a bit of a hidden gem, actually. This is a film that I just kind of caught by accident. I believe it's called We Are What We Are.
Right, I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
I recommend that. Very good film, actually. I went in with very low expectations, really expecting nothing, and it's a really good film. And I wouldn't say it's really a spoiler alert. You learn quite early on in the movie what this film actually revolves around. So that's a good movie, by the way. That's about cannibalism, but from a kind of a family unit perspective.
If you want to go a bit later on, obviously you've heard of Eli Roth.
Unfortunately. Yeah, you're going to talk about...
The Green Inferno.
I was going to ask you about that. What are your thoughts on that? As a quote-unquote love letter to the cannibal exploitation genre, what do you think?
I hated it, to be honest.
Don't hold back, man. Say what you mean. Go on.
I absolutely hated that film. It just does nothing for me. It's too much of a love letter. He's obviously trying to update the story, and he's trying to, gain points by showing these, the new batch of kids now into horror. Yeah. Look at what I'm trying to do. Is this going to be shocking and all that? And it fails for me on every level.
I think there's a fine line. There's a very fine line between paying homage and ripping off. And I think Eli Roth is actually a pretty overrated filmmaker. If I'm honest, I don't see him as a great horror director. I know some people out there, he made his big splash with, Cabin Fever in 2002, but, and Hostel, which, following in the footsteps of Saw, kind of in a way gave birth to that whole kind of torture porn era and that. But I've just never really thought that much of Eli Roth as a film director.
I can certainly understand.
I think he's a little overrated. I think he's a bit overrated. He hasn't directed a single film that I've loved. I mean, admittedly, Cabin Fever I thought was okay, and Hostel, okay in that for what it was. It's not like it was a bad movie. I don't think it was a bad movie or anything, but I think he's somebody that shot up the ranks way too quickly for what he's churned out.
I think he's a complete hack, if I'm honest. I'm not going to hold back. I think he's a terrible director. I like you say, with Cabin Fever, they had a couple of good moments, but mostly when he's ripping off other films, I find.
I can't believe they remade it. I mean, like a film that came out in the early 2000s, and there was like 2015, 2016 remake. What?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, seriously, that is sitting on 0% on Rotten Tomatoes as well. You know that? It's got 0%.
Really?
It is awful. I mean, it makes the first film look like Citizen Kane. It's frigging terrible. Eli Roth. I'm struggling to think. I mean, there are loads more cannibalism films out there, certainly. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm not sure if that got mentioned. Obviously, there's cannibalistic undertones there as well, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. One I would like to mention as well, is probably one of the most well-known films ever, is Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, of course, Buffalo Bill, yeah, and Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, they obviously went on to make, other films. I really like Manhunter as well in that series, and Red Dragon.
Yeah.
But my favourite of even above the original is Hannibal from 2001. I think that's a way underrated film.
Yeah, directed by Ridley Scott. I have not seen that film in a long time. It's got Ray Liotta, hasn't it, and Julianne Moore as well. Gary Oldman, if I recall.
Gary Oldman.
I haven't seen it since its theatrical release.
It's sort of, you could even put it in the giallo genre, because there's a lot of Italian, it's linked to a lot of Italian things, that film. And I think it's a film that needs to be, you don't really hear it getting talked about as much as obviously Silence of the Lambs and maybe Manhunter get talked about more. But Hannibal, I think, is the best one of the series.
Oh, really? Above Silence of the Lambs?
Yeah. And I love Silence of the Lambs.
I have a friend who's in the same ballpark as you on that one, so that's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs is a great movie. It's one of them films actually that I've always kind of like. People call it a horror movie, and I've always struggled to call Silence of the Lambs a horror movie. I realise it has a lot of horror elements to it, serial killer, cannibalism, and all that. I've always kind of seen it as a crime serial killer thriller. What's your view on it? Is it a horror movie in your eyes?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
I'd say so. It's a horror in the same way the likes is of Seven.
See, I don't count Seven as a horror movie either. I don't. Some people do.
Right.
I get it. It's just we've all got our own kind of like perspective, and it's interesting to hear why somebody sees something a different way. I've never seen Seven as a horror movie.
Would you call like both of your thoughts on this? Would you call Zodiac?
No, it's not a horror film. It's a thriller.
No.
It's a serial killer thriller.
Would you call Psycho a horror film?
Now, that's the thing. I actually mentioned this on the Psycho podcast I did. Psycho is one of them films it's thriller / horror. In a way, it's kind of very much the mould of a thriller, but you bring in... it has the horror elements to it, and I feel like it has enough horror elements to it to be classified as a horror movie, and I know it very often is. But you look at Silence of the Lambs, I can't remember what film site I was looking at now, but it wasn't labelled as horror, and I can't remember what site that was now. But it's interesting because you look at various sites, some don't count it as a horror movie, some do. There's a very big divide with movies like that.
Yeah. I don't get that because I can, even like I just said then, Zodiac, I do see them as horror films, but I suppose it's all,
Yeah, great movie though. I'm glad you mentioned it because Zodiac 2007 is a great film and probably Fincher's most overlooked. That or The Game with Michael Douglas. Two very good films.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to move on to the next one now. So basically this is the third pick for me, third spot. And that is anthologies. I have a profound love of anthologies in general. I'm not going to go too much off topic, but everything from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, most recently Inside Number 9, Tales of the Unexpected. I love short, self-contained stories that very often have twist endings because you never know what you're in store for with each segment, with each story. And the EC horror comics of the 1950s, the likes of Tales from the Crypt, The Haunt of Fear and that, is what really got me into anthologies. I used to read them comic books, love them short stories, them twists. And there are so many great anthology films out there. Now, admittedly, some of my favourites are from the movies of yesteryear. I mean, kind of like the granddaddy of anthology films to me is 1945's Dead of Night. And then Amicus, of course, the British film studio that churned out quite a lot of anthologies, the likes of Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, Asylum, The House That Dripped Blood, Torture Garden. Anthologies have existed for a long time, and I've noticed this over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years. Anthologies have made a comeback. Like, they've always kind of been there, but there's this big resurgence of them at the moment.
Of course, the new Creepshow series.
New Creepshow TV series. Inside Number 9 is a show that's coming up to its 6th season. Fantastic show. Black Mirror. The Twilight Zone recently made a pretty unsuccessful comeback, but it came back for 2 seasons. Movies. I mean, a lot of films over the last few years as well. Some films churned out. We've had the likes of Holidays. We've had XX, which the gimmick for that film, all 4 segments were directed by females. The Mortuary Collection, which was exclusive to Shudder, which actually came out, I think it was earlier this year. A pretty good anthology film, in fact. Scare Package as well. Of course, Creepshow from 1982 is one of the most well-loved by a lot of horror fans, and Creepshow too. And VHS, released in 2012, basically adopted the found footage aspect for an anthology, which I don't believe had been done before. I think that's the first found footage anthology movie.
What do you think? What do you think to its execution?
I think VHS was actually quite good. I liked it. VHS 2, not quite up to the first movie. But, I mean, there's VHS viral. Less said about that crap, the better. It was just one film too many in that franchise. But VHS and VHS 2 were, I thought, quite good anthologies that did a good job of adopting that found footage aspect. I've just always loved... especially, I mean, when it comes to anthologies as well, okay, I love the whole kind of the twist aspect. You always kind of go into these things expecting some kind of twist in that. Whereas things like Creepshow, they're more... Creepshow is essentially a love letter to them EC horror comics of the 50s. It was obviously George A. directed by Romero, written by Stephen King. They themselves were big fans of them comics as kids. And it's just a loving homage to that era of horror. And I think the TV series of Creepshow has done a pretty good job, actually. I've really liked it. I mean, like with anything, though, there's some segments and stories that are always going to be better than others. It's very hard to create an anthology film where all of the segments are equally as good as each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very, very hard to do. There's not many anthologies out there that have really, truly achieved that. And there is another anthology as well, which is it's a modern film, and it's one that has quickly become one of my favourites of all time. And that's 2007's Trick or Treat.
Oh, yes. One of my favourites as well.
Which is a great movie. And why that film stands out from the crowd is because it's the structure of the movie. Typically, with most anthologies, in a lot of them at least, there's a wraparound. There's a general wraparound. There's these moments in between each story that connect. With Trick or Treat, it's set on Halloween night, and all of these stories are like seamlessly interwoven with each other.
Yeah.
It's structured so well. And Trick or Treat, and deservedly, it has a big cult following. I think they've created a great little horror icon, actually, with Sam.
I think it's a crime not to watch that every Halloween.
It's a perfect Halloween movie.
I rate that very highly.
Yeah, it does a great job of capturing the Halloween spirit. So, yeah, anthologies for me, as I say, because with it, you're getting kind of like 4, 5, however many segments, you're kind of getting 4 or 5 mini films in one. You're getting different stories in one, and that's what I love about it. And, as I've said, I mean, there are a lot out there now. And anthologies have made a big comeback. And my favourite TV show at the moment is Inside Number 9, which I can't wait for the 6th season, which starts the week after next. What's your thoughts? What's kind of like, you two guys, what's kind of like some of your favourite anthology films?
Right. Ones I would like to mention is, I know there's a lot of controversy behind the film, is Twilight Zone the movie.
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Obviously, 3 people died during the shoot, and John Landis was I think he went to court and everything with it. But I do actually like the film. I do actually, I like the wraparound, with Dan Aykroyd.
Oh, you want to see something really scary?
Yeah, that's the one. And but the part of the film I love the most is the 20,000 Feet.
Nightmare at 20,000 Feet with John Lithgow.
Yeah, which originally was done by William Shatner, I believe.
William Shatner starred in it, and Richard Matheson actually wrote it. I think we talked about this recently, didn't we? Richard Matheson, that wrote the story, didn't actually like the segment in the movie.
That's right, yeah. And the reason I brought it up, I think last time or whatever, is recently Shudder have done like a TV series on like horror like productions that were doomed sort of thing. I think they covered The Exorcist and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So that's one. Another one that's quite underrated I find is Body Bags.
Yes. Yeah, 2 of the stories written by John Carpenter.
That's right, yeah. I think there's one in that called The Eye, where this baseball player basically loses an eye, and he's got the eye of this serial killer.
Yeah, it's Mark Hamill, isn't it?
That's right. I think that's an excellent episode. And I also like the gas station in that.
Yeah,
which is like
that's very kind of very Halloween-esque, because Carpenter directed the first 2 segments, and the third segment I believe was directed by Tobe Hooper. And,
that's right. And Tobe Hooper makes an appearance in the first story as well.
He does, and Wes Craven makes a cameo in the first segment.
Right. Or maybe that's what I was thinking then.
No, I think Tobe Hooper appears at the very end in the morgue.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you are right. Yeah.
And in the first segment as well, this was a blink and you'll miss it moment. Sam Raimi appears.
Thank you. Do you know what? I'm glad because I was going through my head. Did Raimi have a cameo in it? So I'm glad that you've confirmed that.
He doesn't appear in body, but you see the ID badge of the employee, and it's Sam Raimi on the ID badge.
The one story in that didn't quite resonate for me was Hair.
Yeah, with Stacy Keach.
That's right, yeah. Didn't quite work, but like you say, you find with all these anthologies, there's maybe one that doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Another one I'll bring up is Cat's Eye from 1982 with Drew Barrymore.
Oh, that was at 85. Yeah, young Drew Barrymore.
85,
James Woods is in the first segment, isn't he?
That's right, the smoking segment.
Yes.
I've always liked that film. That's one that I've watched when I was younger, and just you get that nostalgia feeling and that.
Yeah.
And we used to rent that regularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a few I like.
What about you, Samuel? Any anthologies we've not mentioned? Are there any others that you'd like to?
Two that have come to mind right now. I was thinking of one, but one's just jumped straight into my head. So one's called Little Deaths. So it's a 3-part segment anthology, and it involves, it deals with death, it deals with sex, it deals with drugs. And all I'll say is this: when I watched it a few years back with a friend of mine, I deliberately showed him the cut version.
Yeah, I'm
just going to leave it at that.
All right.
The other one is Bloodmania by the infamous Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Okay.
Right. And it's a nice little 4-part. I mean, that's up to you. He sadly passed away before the film was given an official release, so that did leave a few heartbroken fans. However, it's one of those anthologies. Unless you're familiar with Herschel Gordon Lewis, you're not going to like it. It's got that self-aware, dark sense of humor. It's got that the gore effects that have this mixture of being nasty yet completely cheesy at the same time. It's completely self-aware. I mean, it's completely imbalanced though. I mean, the first one has this bit with a demonic hook, which has some funny moments. You got another segment in it about I guess you could say, hysterical girlfriend who's being delusional. There are 2 other parts. One of them's almost like out of a slasher film, so that was pretty funny. But then again, they're not, unless you're familiar with his works, it's not one that I overly recommend. Those are 2 anthologies I say I do like.
There's another one I'd say from the 80s as well, Tales from the Dark Side, which again was quite a popular anthology series, ran for 4 seasons. There was a Tales from the Dark Side movie. Which I believe was 3 segments. It was one segment that really stood out to me, and it starred, I'm pretty certain it was James Remar, obviously from 79's cult film, The Warriors. And it was the scene, I think it was called The Secret. I'm pretty certain the segment was called The Secret, and that always stood out to me. And there's another anthology that I need to get hold of. It's quite pricey, and it's called After Midnight.
I've heard of that one,
Yeah, and for the life of me, I think it's 3 segments, but I can't remember anything of the film. I don't remember any of the segments, but I remember just walking away afterwards thinking, that was quite good. But it's been years since I've seen it, so that's one that I need to actually put. But annoyingly, it hasn't had a UK DVD release, I don't believe. So, right. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more, but there's just some of my... But when it comes to anthologies, in all honesty, there's actually more anthology series out there than I prefer to films.
Can I just mention one film? Again, I've just realised it now, and it'd be a crime if I don't mention it. And that's the TV version of Tales from the Crypt and the segment All Through the House.
Oh yeah.
Where you've got the killer Santa Claus.
Yeah, Larry Drake. Yeah, and because you're talking about, you're talking about the film.
I'm talking about the film with Joan Collins.
Yeah.
I think that is fantastic. I think the way that is set up and the whole Christmas atmosphere, I would say that's probably my favourite segment from anyone.
Yeah.
If I'm honest.
That was a really good segment. I really do like the 5th segment, actually, as well, in that film. It's with the blind people getting revenge on the guy that's not looking after them properly.
Yeah, and there's quite a nasty scene in there, isn't there? When he's got to go through all these bad wire and all that.
But TV shows, The Twilight Zone. I'm not gonna, because I mentioned this show 9 million times. The Twilight Zone's my all-time. Not only is it my favourite anthology series, it's my favourite TV show of all time, because that show was ahead of its time, and it's that show has become so ingrained into popular culture now that so many shows and films have actually taken elements from it, and without a lot of people even realising. One of the most influential TV series of all time. So anyway, Samuel, we're going to get on to your second subgenre now. What is it?
Body horror.
Okay.
So I think the film that this in itself is an absolute, as the creature is a hybrid, the main film that got me into it was the likes of Alien. It's science fiction, it borrows elements from The Exorcist as well as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. However, the body horror, especially with the horrific fate of John Hurt, absolutely changed my life forever from that film. And a very short time later, we discovered a certain man known as David Cronenberg. Do you know what? I wish that man came back to making horror films, because Videodrome was absolutely ahead of its time, and I still think holds relevance to today as well as it did when it came out in 1983.
I agree. The 80s as well, the decade that the 80s I feel like was a time when practical effects were really picking up and evolving for this kind of movie, weren't they?
Oh, it absolutely exploded out of everywhere when it came to all kinds of mutations. And Brian Usner, talked about how, with the uses of prosthetics and the wells of the plastics as well, expanded horror to a whole new level. Spectacle horror came back with an absolute bloody vengeance. And I'm glad I brought up Brian Usner as well, because his films, alongside doing the Reanimator films, which again I think are magnifique when it comes to the explosions of the bodies and just the decomposing, is Society that really turns up the body horror to such a degree. I just thought, it's that bit near the end, you have to you need to watch it, but it's just so repulsive. That's like the sort of stuff that competed with Cronenberg.
Yeah. I think I know the scene you're talking about. You're not talking about a scene with a head, are you?
No, I'm talking about let's just we won't spoil anything. I think that grand example of special effects, which we won't reveal here, I think, because you can't explain it. It's just so screwed up. Describing it does no justice to it whatsoever.
Cronenberg's like the king, isn't he? He's kind of like the king of that subgenre, if you will. I mean, The Fly in 1986, that's my personal favourite Cronenberg film.
Oh, absolutely. I love that
movie. Just the practical effects are just fantastic. And at its core as well, that film's kind of a love story, isn't it?
It's a tragic,
yeah.
And it's one of those where, this is absolutely up for debate, it's one of those very few rare remakes that is as good, if not superior, to the original film. And the original, with Vincent Price, was pretty darn good. However, the body horror in The Fly is used to really exemplify the tragedy of such a disaster, to the point of where people even thought it was a metaphor for AIDS, the way that the disease destroyed the body, destroyed the person, and destroyed those around them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I've never looked at it that way, but that's spot on.
Certainly within that, it was within that time period that AIDS was, it caused... I think a film, not to go too much off topic, I think me and Darren talked about a film a little while ago, in fact. It might have been on one of the podcasts, I'm not sure. When Cruising came out in 1980.
Yeah.
Again, that caused a lot of controversy for, the arrival of AIDS was around that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I knew what you was going to say then as well.
And it caused... I think that's one of the reasons that Cruising caused a lot of controversy upon release, but... It's like getting back to The Fly with the 58 film and then the 86 film. I think the 58 film is good, but it's one of them remakes that surpasses it. I think there's another film from the 80s that came out just a couple of years after that as well. The Blob. The Blob is a film that surpasses the original, and maybe that's thanks largely to its great practical effects, which I think still hold up really well now. But that's another remake that I think, and again, when 1982's the thing. I mean, would you kind of classify that kind of stuff as body horror?
Almost certainly, especially with the likes of The Thing as well. Again, just the complete destruction of the sense of identity to the point of where can't we really trust anyone anymore? And it really captured the time as well of this cynical point in, you could say, American or just global culture, of where we're losing trust with each other. The enemy is within us, and it really plays up more so. With the original, The Thing from Another World, evil is out there, he's stalking us. Whereas with Carpenter's The Thing, the enemy is within us. And boy, Rob Bottin's work with the body horror is incredible.
Oh yeah, still holds up really well now. And he came off because he actually did The Howling, didn't he, the year before? 1981. Rob Bottin, one of the, and obviously he was a student. I think me and Darren talked about this before. He was a student at Rick Baker's. And they were kind of like in 81, they were going against each other at the Oscars for like The Howling and An American Werewolf in London, kind of student versus master. But Rob Bottin learned from the best. And yes, such great. I mean, what other kind of body horror films are there from that kind of like time period? Any more Cronenberg examples? The Brood. I know The Brood was 70s, but The Brood, well, not really body horror, was it?
You could certainly make an argument, but again, it's the same with Shivers. You can make the argument for the likes of body horror.
So what about more recent? What about kind of more recent? Now, would you count, because I actually think this is a really good horror comedy released in 2006, Sliver?
Definitely you could argue with the body horror in the way, in terms of like playing up with the grossness. It's like Frank Henenlotter. It's definitely inspired by the likes of Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case or Eve and Brain Damage. Yeah. So in that case, no, it's definitely ups up the gross up factors. So you could certainly, it's not as mean-spirited. Slither certainly it plays up the comedic horror aspects. The comedy in the body horror and capturing the horror in that comedy.
Yeah,
I think Sliver is like a remake of Night of the Creeps.
I get what you're saying.
Very similar in its, the portrayal of the actual like killer, like they're like little slug things.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, Sliver's basically kind of an ode to kind of the horror movies of yesteryear. It is very much James Gunn that directed it. Obviously Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. A lot of people probably don't realise he did Sliver. I don't know, because when I hear James Gunn mentioned, everyone talks about Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously, because the MCU's this huge success.
He came from exploitation films.
He did. He's complete contrast now, isn't it? to what he's doing now. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing not to go off topic too much, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he does for Suicide Squad, in all honesty. What other kind of like body horror movies are out there? As you said, Brain Damage is very much kind of a low budget cult horror film, isn't it?
Would you say Rabid is one? With Marion Chambers?
Kind of to a degree, I guess. I mean, I don't know, because the term body horror, you don't really hear too much. Slasher's easy to define. Zombies easy to define. Body horror, it's like, I mean, a movie could have one scene with one moment of that. So would you call the film a body horror movie because it has that one moment, that one scene?
Exactly. Would you call Jason Goes to Hell a body horror?
No. No, it's a slasher movie. It's a slasher flick. Even though it has a supernatural edge to it.
Body. Yeah.
But
I can see it, though.
I tell you what, actually, speaking of this debate in terms of body horror, remember a few months back, Barry, we watched Contracted.
Yeah.
Well, there's another film very similar to that. I'd probably say is a hidden gem called Thanatomorphos.
Okay.
Which follows a very similar trend about, involving a one night stand, and it explores the decay of the body. So is it contract or contracted?
Contracted.
It is contracted, yeah. So that explores more on the emotional side of trying to get on with life whilst slowly being taken over by this disease, whereas Thanatomorphos focuses more on the sense of self-isolation and trying to come to terms with it, and it's more visceral. It's more on the practical effect side of it. So I think that's a great example of low-budget body horror in terms of 21st century horror. It's not necessarily one I'd say as emotive or as you could say as accessible as, say, Contracted.
Yeah, my fiance actually bought it. I haven't watched it. She actually bought it a few months ago. I'm pretty certain. I'm sure that's the film that she purchased from Amazon. I've seen the two Contracted films. I've actually seen both of them, and it's essentially at its core, it is a zombie film, but you don't really realise that, do you, until near the end of the movie. It's a different take. It's a very kind of interesting take, if you will, on... it kind of puts a unique spin, doesn't it, almost, on the zombie genre with that film.
Oh, certainly. It definitely looks more at the the degrade in terms of the mentality and states. Yeah, so it's another one that sort of blurs the lines because the body horror isn't as obvious as say in Thanatomorphos. However, yeah, as you say, it's more close to the likes of a zombie film, even though both films do follow a similar trend about just completely falling apart, decaying inside and outside.
Yeah, exactly. Right, we're going to get on to the second pick now for Darren. Darren, what's your choice? What's in second spot?
So my second choice is giallo films, which I think everyone pretty much knows me for anyway, online and that. Yeah, basically they're like sleazy murder mysteries. I don't really have to delve too deep into it because I think the actual origin of a giallo, most people who are listening to this will know. But yeah, I came into it quite late in watching these type of films, like the mid-2000s and that. And I had seen Dario Argento produced Demons, which is obviously not a giallo, but it's an Italian horror film.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And then I went on and I watched Suspiria. But then I sort of found out then about Dario Argento, and I delved into all his giallo films.
Yeah.
So the first two I watched was Tenebrae and Deep Red. And I absolutely love those films, but they were so sort of washed out on these really bad VHS, rips.
Yeah.
That I had to really go back like a few years later and watch on DVD. But yeah, I pretty much love everything about this subgenre. You got the music, Ennio Morricone, you got Goblin, you got Bruno Nicolai. They seem to add something to the film as well. Very much a film on visuals. A lot of the films do have a black glove killer, but it's not necessarily there all the time, because you've got ones that do inheritance scams, and you've got trippy psychedelic ones as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I delved in a bit deeper, and I got into the likes of like Sergio Martino, and I love his giallo films. Films like Torso, Your Voice is a Locked Room, which I actually think is just absolutely brilliant. Case of Scorpion's Tail, All the Colors of the Dark, which sort of mixes giallo and the occult. So yeah, and like just totally love the genre, and a couple of ones, like underrated ones I got written down here, is Black Belly of the Tarantula.
Yeah, I've got that DVD, but I think it might be, I'm not sure if it's a bootleg, because it's not had a UK official DVD release, has it? Not in the UK.
No, I got the Region 1 DVD. But I do believe there's a Blu-ray that might be German or something. But
okay.
You've got What Have You Done to Solange? I think that's another.
That's a good giallo, yeah.
I love that. Camille Keaton's small but so significant performance. Absolutely superb example. And
it's quite a hard watch at times as well. But with the subject matter, I don't think that would go today, would they really? But one we've mentioned before, The House with Laughing Windows. I think that.
Yes, we did a podcast, didn't we?
Yeah. A couple more I got written down is Who Saw Her Die, which is like a film that came out before Don't Look Now.
Yeah.
And I had
one-time Bond actor George Lazenby, yeah?
That's right, yeah. The Killer Must Kill Again, which Luigi Cozzi, which was one of Dario Argento's right-hand men.
Yeah.
That's one that don't get mentioned ever. And it's really good, competent, solid giallo.
Yeah.
And another one, if you want to like delve into sort of like a slow burn, is The Short Night of Glass Dolls, Arbolado.
Yeah.
I think that's really criminally underrated. But obviously some of my faves, the proper faves are obviously Tenebrae, you've got Opera.
Yeah.
You've got The Girl Who Knew Too Much, was like regarded as the first of its kind.
Yeah, Mario Bava.
That's right, yeah, who went on to do Black Sabbath as well.
Yeah.
Which got a giallo segment in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's so much to explore with this genre as well, giallo, because you've got crossover films, with slasher, you've got Stage Fright, Pieces, The New York Ripper.
See, that's the thing. I'm glad you mentioned them, actually. Stage Fright, because that's the 87 film, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That is often cited. I always see that movie as a slasher, but then there's people who actually call it a giallo, and the same goes for Pieces. I've heard a lot of people now. Pieces is one of them guilty pleasure films of mine. Pieces is, it's trashy. But you know what? It's so much goddamn fun. I can't help but really like Pieces. I really enjoy it. But again, it gets classified by quite a lot of people as a giallo, but I always see it as a slasher movie.
I can see sort of both ends of it, both arguments of it, really. And New York Ripper's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because you've got the slasher like elements, obviously, with the killer, but then you've got this weird undercurrent of like Donald Duck saying the killer.
Yeah, it's kind of like kind of disturbing but kind of funny at the same time. It's kind of weird, very sleazy film.
I read an interview that was at the Dark Side magazine where the writer for the New York Ripper classified it as a giallo comedy. How far would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't call it a comedy at all. I would disagree. I don't see that film as a comedy. I mean, that film is pretty damn hardcore. It's brutal. The murders are brutal.
Nasty to say the least.
Yeah, it's sleazy. I always feel like I need a bloody shower after watching that film.
Yeah, that film famously, I think they had a print of it they brought into the UK and it didn't even get past the aeroplane down the steps.
Yeah.
they ordered it.
Yeah.
They ordered it out the country.
When they classified it, when they regulated it, apparently 3 out of the 4 examiners were quietly weeping because it was that overwhelming in terms of its sheer nastiness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, like you said, I mean, the giallo really kind of like started in the 60s with the likes of The Girl Who Knew Too Much. Of course, Blood and Black Lace came out the following year, which is my all-time favourite giallo. Absolutely love that movie. But it wasn't really until the 70s, was it? That was kind of the golden age, wasn't it? Where giallo were being churned out left, right and centre. Like you said, I'm glad you mentioned Sergio Martino, because he's actually directed some of my favourite giallos. I mean, with the likes of Torso, which again is a really sleazy film, but I really like Torso. You mentioned Case for the Scorpion's Tail, didn't you, as well?
Yeah.
Of course, I really like The Strange Vice of Miss Ward as well. I think that's quite Hitchcockian. It's kind of like a Hitchcockian film with a lot of sleaze thrown in.
I think you can go into any of Sergio Martino's. I think he's done about 6, 6 or 7, if I remember rightly. Yeah. Any of his giallo titles, you're going to get a good film.
Yeah.
And even though he's starting to get recognition now, I still feel he's always going to be behind the. People are going to always look to the likes of Fulci and Argento.
Yeah.
But he's on. Maybe not quite on par, but he's not far behind them.
I think from me personally, I mean, Argento's like the big name out there. I mean, Mario Bava as well, like the Italian godfather of horror, even someone like Argento looked to Bava for inspiration. Argento's like the big name, but I like some of Martino's films just as much as I do Argento's. Argento might have more artistic merits, certainly. He certainly knows how to film a sequence and that. He makes great use of camera work and all that. I get that. But I actually think Martino has churned out some really solid giallos.
I actually think Your Voice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key is probably, for me, it's his highlight. It's his best film. And again, it's criminally never really mentioned much.
Yeah.
I highly urge anyone listening to this now who has not seen that film to go out and get a copy.
Yeah.
Because it really needs, it's a story. It's the Black Cat story from Edgar Allan Poe, but it's got like a new little sort of...
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously been adapted many times over the years, hasn't it, to like different versions. I believe Fulci did the Black Cat, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. And Argento did it for his Two Evil Eyes segment as well.
Yeah. Which,
funny enough, could have come under the, the anthology heading. But, another couple more I will briefly say, I don't want to take up too much time, is... You've got Spasmo.
One of the best titles ever, isn't it? I mean...
Yeah, and one even better, which not so much better title, but better film, is Eyeball. I think
that's good. Great. Yeah, I've actually got that on Blu-ray. I watched that for the first time on YouTube a few years ago. And then when I found out there was a Blu-ray release coming out, I pre-ordered it. I think that's a good giallo. I do like that.
It's just like so much cheese in that film.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. And then you've got
it's kind of part of the charm, isn't it? You come to like it wouldn't be a true giallo without that, would it? It's.
And funny enough, can you watch Eyeball without having that theme in your head for the next 2 weeks?
I know. Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned some of the scores as well. Goblin, Tenebrae, obviously a later giallo because that was an '82 film. But again, I think one of Argento's best. And let's quickly mention as well another giallo that we've talked about before that doesn't get talked about much, Sleepless in 2001.
Yeah, I was going to mention that actually. Goblin actually come back to do the same track in that. That was their big comeback film for Argento, I think. Another film that, again, don't really get a lot of recognition. It's highly, regarded as opera being his last great film. But I really like Trauma and I really like Sleepless. And funny enough, I like the Stendhal Syndrome as well.
Yeah, Trauma and the Stendhal Syndrome. I'll confess, I've only seen them once each, and they're films that I do need to revisit. Sleepless,
we
I've
need to
seen
do
a few.
that.
Yeah, we'll do it. Maybe that's an upcoming episode. We could cover them because Sleepless I really did like, and I'm glad you mentioned The House with Laughing Windows because that is one that rarely ever gets talked about. I think that's a really overlooked giallo.
Sam, have you into much giallo films, or is it like a weak spot for yourself?
Well, I think I won't say it's my vocation in the same way that it's both of you two in the slightest. I think I will say I'm glad that you brought up Goblin with the scores because in 2015, Celluloid Screams, they actually had them there to do a live score for Deep Red. So that was a hell of an experience. So with the giallos, I think it's one that I do need to explore a little bit more on. I think heinously, I've stolen Barry's copy of A House with Laughing Windows.
No,
I've not been able to lend it back.
No, I actually... hang on a sec. Did you give me it back or did I reorder? Because I've got it here. I've got The House with Laughing Windows.
It's possible
so
I
I'm
gave
guessing
it back.
I probably Did you give it back? I can't remember. Or I repurchased it or something. But it's a good giallo. It's one that stands out from the crowd. It's very different to a lot of other giallos without going into details and that. But I've always loved what I love about giallo. I love mysteries. I love whodunits. That's why I like certain. There's another subgenre we're going to get to in this. A certain aspect I like of that subgenre. I love the whole mystery. Who's the killer? And you kind of like guessing, trying to work out. And that's obviously what a lot of giallos are about, aren't they?
Yeah, and to be honest, some of the endings are completely ridiculous.
Oh, they're completely nonsensical. No, logic go because if you go back and watch it, it's like it's impossible.
Exactly. This is what adds to it for me. The fun aspect and the over the topness of some of them.
Yeah.
I do. Don't get me wrong. I do like the likes of Deep Red and stuff like that, where it's all logical. But then you get something like you say, the case of the Bloody Iris or something like that, where it's just over the top.
Yeah.
But it's all so Strip Nude for the Killer. Have you seen that one?
I have. Again, great title. You've got to love their titles, haven't you? Strip Nude for Your Killer. Yeah, it was okay. It was okay.
The ending to that is...
Oh, yeah. We're not going to go into it in case people haven't seen it and that. But you need to watch The Editor, which is very much kind of a homage / parody of the giallo.
Astron 6 did it, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, some people really do not like that. I know some people who absolutely love it. It seems to be very polarized. So, I mean, what did you do you think that it's an acceptable love letter?
What, The Editor?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. At the end of the day, this movie addresses what giallos are about. The giallos are, it's a subgenre that does often prove to be nonsensical and all this and that. I thought it was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Now, I've only seen it once. I don't know if I'm going to like it as much second time round. But I remember walking away and thinking I really enjoyed that. I found it funny. There's certain tropes within the giallo that this film really pokes fun at.
I've got like a friend in America who really likes The Editor. I've never seen it, and funny enough, they'll probably be listening to this podcast. Steve and Dana, it's a quick shout out. But I know Steve really likes The Editor, and his girlfriend, wife, doesn't like it. But it's one I need to. Yeah, people keep telling me, but I keep reading the reviews, and like Sam said, they're like 50-50. Some people love it, some people hate it.
Yeah, it's pretty divisive.
Not got there.
Yeah, it's a pretty divisive film. I really enjoyed it for what it was. At the end of the day, it's like, all right, for example, slasher movies, okay? There's spoofs out there. The Scary Movie, I don't particularly care for. So-so and all that. But there's one called Student Bodies, released in 1981. Now, I love slasher movies, but what Student Bodies is doing, it's poking fun and taking the mick of the whole slasher genre. And I'm all for that. Because I understand that slasher movies are far from perfect. There's a lot of flaws and all this and that. There's so many nonsensical moments, but I'm cool with that. I think some people probably out there get very kind of defensive when something's poking fun at something they love.
Exactly. I think, if by putting out a film like that brings more people into the genre of watching, slasher or whatever, then great. I got nothing wrong. I really like Student Bodies.
Yeah.
And I think there's another one called Class Reunion as well, which
there is.
Slasher.
Yeah.
I really like those films. And if you want to go even more obscure, there's another one called Pandemonium.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's all good, to be honest.
Yeah. We're going to get on to the next subject anyway now. We're going to get on to what is my number two pick,